Hi, I'm Larissa. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make a reversible bucket hat. If you're like me and you sew a lot and you rework clothing, you probably end up with a stash of fabric scraps. I'm always looking for ways to repurpose these. So today I'm going to show you how I turn these scraps into a reversible bucket hat. Let's get straight to it. For this project, I'm using a pattern that I actually created. You can download it for free on my website, linked below. It's adaptable to 3 different sizes and it includes written out instructions that will help you follow along the steps of this video. Today's bucket hat will be made out of these ripped up Levi's, the bottom of some cutoffs I made, and this checkered fabric from a skirt I reworked. If you'd like your bucket hat to be all one color and you have larger scraps of fabric, go ahead and overlap the pattern pieces. If you have smaller scraps of fabric, or if you just like to go for that mixed pattern, color block patchwork look, then you'll keep the pattern pieces separate and cut the fabric individually. Where the pattern piece says overlap, this now becomes your seam allowance. Since these pattern pieces are individually fairly small, making these bucket hats is a great use of some of those odd-shaped fabric scraps. Now, since we're making this bucket hat reversible, we will need 2 crown pieces, 4 band pieces, and 4 brim pieces in total. I want one side of my bucket hat to be all the same color denim, and so for this one, I'm using these ripped up Levi's since this is the largest amount of fabric in one color that I have. I love using jeans for these bucket hats because the denim is thick enough to give the bucket hat just enough stability. You can see here that I have overlapped the pattern pieces and taped them together, and now I'm just getting an idea of how to lay them out on my denim and where to cut. Next step is to trace your pattern pieces onto your denim. Cut your trace design using a rotocutter or scissors. For the patchwork side, you will need 2 band A and 2 brim A pieces in the same fabric color. Using the bottom of this pant leg is nice because the fabric is already doubled, so I only have to draw out the pattern once and then cut both pieces at the same time. I've decided to make the crown piece for the patchwork side out of the denim. This is the bottom of a 90s skirt that had some discoloration, so I reworked it. I'm using this for band B and brim B, cutting 2 pieces of each. Next step is to pin all the A sides to the B sides with right sides together. Take the pin pieces over to your sewing machine. Using a 1/2 inch seam allowance and a straight stitch, you'll sew the pieces together. Now we have both sides of the hat ready to assemble. From here on out, I'll take you on the journey of putting one side together. You can do both sides at the same time or complete one side and then move on to the second side. Pin your brim pieces and your band pieces together, right side facing. Using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, sew your band pieces together and then your brim pieces together. Once all the pieces are assembled, press open your seams and clip any loose threads. We want to make sure the crown is pinned evenly onto the band piece before we sew it on. Now the band piece is already divided into 4 equal sections, but let's divide and mark our crown piece. We do this by folding it in half and marking the top and bottom with a pin, and then folding it into quarters and marking each side. Now we'll be able to line up these pin marks on the crown with the seam marks on the band. Quick note for the solid side of the bucket hat, you'll want to mark the center of the band to align with the bottom center of the crown. Now it's time to pin these pieces together, aligning where we marked on the crown to the seams of the band. Once those 4 points are in place, we can go ahead and pin the rest of the crown to the band. Sew these 2 pieces together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Because you're working with a curved edge, it's best to take this step slowly and carefully, making sure that all the fabric is laying the right direction, that you're not catching any extra folded fabric underneath. Flip your hat right side out, and now we're ready to attach the brim. With right sides together, overlap your brim on top of the band and match it up so that you have opposite fabric touching. Carefully line up your seams and pin in place. With your 4 seams carefully aligned and pinned in place, now you're ready to pin all the way around the brim and the band. Sew the brim and the band together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Again, you're working on a semi-curved edge, so sew carefully, making sure that none of the fabric is rippling or catching. This next step is optional, it just adds extra structure and finesse to the hat. Fold your seams towards each other on the band and sew about 1/8 of an inch away from your seam line. I'm sewing the seam from the brim and the band up towards the band with my stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from my original seam line. The seam from the crown to the band is pressed down towards the band, and again, I'm sewing about 1/8 of an inch away from the original seam line. Because this is a curved edge, you can see I'm carefully making sure the fabric is not rippling underneath itself. This is what it looks like when you're finished, and now we're ready to assemble both sides of our bucket hat together. I'm just taking a quick moment here to sew on my tag to show that this is an article original. To connect the 2 sides of the hat, place them right sides on top of each other. Make sure that oval is facing the same direction on both. Align and pin together your seams. And match up and pin all the way around the brim of the hat. Sew along the edge of the brim using a 1/4 inch seam allowance and leave a 2 to 3 inch gap. This gap is where you will pull the hat right side out. Once the hat is pulled right side out, you'll see it looks a little marshmallowy. We're going to start to correct that. First, you're going to fold the gap in to match the seam allowance. Pin in place, and then you'll want to go around the brim of the hat, making sure that the seam is pulled out to its capacity, and either iron or pin in place to get ready to sew. The next step is to sew right along the edge of the brim all the way around. I'm sewing at about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the brim. With your two sides of the brim laying completely flat against each other, now you're ready to add in your next row of stitches. I like to pin the two sides of the brim together close to the band so that I don't get any rippling on either side. These rows of stitches can be as far or as close together as you want. I like to use the edge of the presser foot as a guide and just copy that and mimic that as I sew each row. And now your hat is complete. 2 looks in one, and a fun and resourceful way to give those fabric scraps new life. Thanks for watching. I hope you'll like and subscribe for more small ways you can make a big difference.